jumbo shrimp, open secret, original copy, paying guest, genuinely fake. Can anyone tell me what these word pairings have in common? And to give you a hint, the answer is actually on the screen. It's called an oxymoron. And these words actually have opposite meanings. But because we internalize them in our vocabulary, we actually don't give it much of a second thought when we talk about it. The term male feminist, which is how I like to describe myself, also has these seemingly internal contradictions. There is one school of thought that says that feminism is a lived experience, that if you do not walk a day in the shoes of a woman, you cannot be a feminist. There is another school of thought which is far more inclusive and recognizes that we all have different experiences, and that patriarchy does not just affect women, but it also is detrimental to the well-being of men and boys. Feminism is also a poorly understood concept. It is not the hatred of men. It is also not a movement that projects female superiority over men. By definition, feminism is the belief that men and women and transgenders have the equal opportunity and equal rights as anybody else. And if you believe this, and I would assume all of you in this room do, then congratulations, you are all feminists. And yes, it is not only possible to be a male feminist, I think it's very important. You might recognize this gentleman. To be honest, there isn't a great deal of difference between the two of us. Yeah, except that he runs a country, is a far better dancer than I ever will be, and has 4 million more followers on Twitter than I do. But that's about it. So, good afternoon once again. You've had a very interesting introduction of myself. I just want to say that I'm immensely privileged, and it's such an honor to be here on stage, the only man, I believe, and that too amongst such a talented, inspiring, phenomenally talented group of women and transgender. So it's a very hard act to follow. This job, you might say, is a very unconventional job for a man to take. But it's also a job that I love, and it's a passion I'm deeply committed to. But if anybody had asked me as a teenager in high school, if they had told me that one day I would be doing this job and I would be championing the cause of women's rights and gender equality, I would have looked at them and said they're delusional or insane. Like most South Asian kids, I grew up in an environment which fueled patriarchy and fueled a sense of male entitlement. I was led to believe, like most boys, that we had special entitlements versus girls and women. When I would come home from school, my mom would always cook a special dish, something I really loved to eat, favorite, and she would tell my sister, "Nahi beta, this is not for you, I'll make you something else, leave this alone." Women were not capable enough to be given responsible decision-making authority. That's what I learned from my father. He was the man of the house. He called the shots. His opinions were interpreted as facts. And he was never, ever wrong. Or at least, he would never admit to making any mistakes. So it was really my mother being terribly overjoyed when she found out I got this job. She still, to this day, proudly tells my father, "If you misbehave, I'm going to pick up the phone and call UN Woman." He's not too happy about that. So yes, there was a time when I believed that women were the weaker sex, both physically and mentally. I also believed that as boys, we were entitled to stare, and tease girls just as we pleased, even if it shattered their self-confidence and self-esteem. It was like a rite of passage. But for me, I think what was more important is to be part of a clique. I wanted to be part of a group and not be ridiculed or ostracized because I couldn't get along with the other boys. Of course, at times, I was very uncomfortable, and I would stand there very helplessly as my friends around me indulge in some very bad behavior. The only saving grace, perhaps, was that I couldn't whistle. Thankfully, I still cannot whistle. So I would just stand there and watch as friends of mine would whistle and catcall. To each one of these girls, and now I'm sure they're women, I truly apologize. I'm terribly sorry. I'm deeply ashamed by the way that I behaved. And it's not just the action, but the inaction that I could have prevented this. This is one of the things I like to impart to young men and boys when I go to college campuses and talk. Just over the weekend, I was actually at a coffee shop in Islamabad, and I overheard a conversation by a group of young men, presumably college students. So one of them was saying, "Yaar, all this hashtag Me Too thing is getting out of hand. I am just so sick of hearing all these women complain all the time." Of course, being the UN Women Rep, I couldn't resist. I walked over to the table and I said, I tried to impart some advice. Why don't you try speaking up? Every time you see or hear a man say, do, touch, or make a decision which is degrading to women. Every single time. Do this just for 1 week, and then come back and tell me just how exhausting that is. I don't think he got it, but it was worth a try. Speaking of the Me Too movement, I think its time has actually arrived in Pakistan, finally. And I must say that I have the greatest of respect and admiration for Misha Shafi, who hails from this great city of Lahore. It took monumental courage for her, I believe, to speak out in the manner that she has on sexual harassment against another big celebrity whom you all know, Ali Zafar. And apparently she's not the only one. Now, I know this issue is terribly divisive and opinions on both sides. And of course, there may be a legal case ensuing, but let me tell you what I think. I believe Misha, and I believe every single woman who has been harassed. Women, especially in Pakistan, have far too much to lose than to gain by making false accusations on something which is so taboo and potentially terribly damaging. Makes no sense. So my hope is that this is a lightning rod, it's a turning point in Pakistan, where women, finally, ordinary women, can break their silence once and for all and put men on notice that they can no longer feel that they are entitled to invade a woman's privacy, invade a woman's personal space with impunity. On a more encouraging note, however, I'm beginning to see increasing numbers of Pakistani men struggling to be stronger advocates of gender equality. Their intentions are generally good, but given years of patriarchal conditioning, they sometimes do not realize how their words and actions reflect unconscious bias. For example, I cannot tell you how many times I have heard educated men and some women say things like, He's such a liberal-minded husband. He actually allows his wife to work even after they got married. Now, I'm a big Bollywood fan, so if you remember the scene from the Bollywood movie Dil Dharakne Do, there's a lovely line in there where Farhan Akhtar, who happens to be also a UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, turns to the character and says, "Do you really think your wife needs your permission to basically access and exercise her right to economic independence?" No. Here's another example. This gentleman is a Pakistani gentleman who was very enthusiastic on International Women's Day and submitted a picture of himself with a placard that he holds, and you can read it. It says, "Respect women. They are our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our wife. Respect them, care for them, love them." Seems like quite a commendable thing to say. Nothing wrong with that on the surface, but it's also as much about what he is saying as what he is not saying. So let me put it this way. Are we supposed to only respect those women in our lives who have one of these familial relationships to us? Is everybody else fair game? So should we not also respect our female co-workers? Should we not respect our female supervisees? Should we not respect the fellow passenger that we commute on the bus with? Should we not respect the woman trying to go to the market in a very crowded bazaar, feeling very uncomfortable? I think that narrow-mindedness is really part of the problem we're facing and not the solution. And the solution, frankly, to gender inequality is far too complex and challenging for me to even attempt to try and answer in the remaining time I have. So let me part by sharing some of my own practical thoughts and suggestions. To the woman in the room, and I know there's many, many more of you than there are men, there are many good men still out there, and you might have married some of them already. But these are the men who really want to be allies on gender equality, but they don't quite understand or know where to start or how to start. Some of them will make honest mistakes, will fumble, and will make wrong decisions. I would simply urge you to be patient, to continue being patient, to guide them, to educate them, and encourage them, rather than sometimes shutting them down or being overtly critical, which only makes them retreat back into their patriarchal corner or their man box. To the men, listen, listen, listen. I don't think I can say that enough times without interrupting women. Be more aware of your privilege, your power, and also the unconscious bias you bring with you. Apologize unconditionally when you have messed up, and do so immediately and generously. Also, hold other men accountable for their actions, and make sure you're one of those men who does not tolerate gender discrimination of any kind or any form. And that, by the way, includes these so-called harmless sexist jokes that we know many of us men indulge in during our tea and cigarette breaks in the workforce. And since we have many people from the private sector, the corporates, I do also want to reach out and speak to the CEOs and the senior managers here. We really need you to work together to accelerate efforts at gender diversity in Pakistan. We clearly know that the private sector will be one of the most important contributing factors to economic growth for the foreseeable future. And women cannot continue to being left out of this equation. If that happens, companies don't flourish and nations won't prosper. I don't think I'm telling you something you don't already know. But just to say that out of the 200 multinationals in Pakistan, there's only less than 1% of them that have women as their CEOs. Even for those companies who would like to boast a very good gender diversity, even in those cases, those companies don't have more than 15% of women on their workforce. It's almost as if all the women left the companies and came here today to be with us. which is a good thing. But I think we have to reach a parity of 50-50 by the year 2030. These are goals we've set out for ourselves. And I still believe that is within the realm of possibility, and it must be done, and I think we will be able to manage. Thank you. And I also know, we had a very good panel discussion that gave you some insights about the work that UN Women is doing in Sialkot with these wonderful women in the factories, and I hope that's something we can continue and that you can support. I do want to end finally on a more optimistic note, and I want to share with you a 2-minute clip, courtesy of our friends at Telenor, which is more my aspiration or my belief of what the Pakistani feminist man ought to look like. If you can please play that. There is a video over at the IT section. Sound.
Women's rights की तो हर कोई बात करता है. Men's rights तो गए बाहर में. It's a man's world after all. जहाँ चाहे जाओ, जो चाहे करो, कोई रुकावट नहीं. Thank God I'm a man. मगर मर्द पैदा होना ही काफी नहीं होता. मर्द बनना भी पड़ता है. और यहाँ मैं दुनिया वालों को सेटिस्फाई न कर सका. डॉक्टर इंजीनियर नहीं, स्टे एट होम डैड हूं. बीवी जॉब करती है. शी इज रियली स्मार्ट. उसकी तो प्रमोशन भी हुई है अभी. पर दुनिया की नजरों में मेरी मर्दानगी की डिमोशन हो गई है. I mean, am I missing something? कहीं से कोई मर्दानगी का टप्पा लगता है. इंजीनियर चेक, गुस्सा चेक, मूछे चेक, मुबारक हो. आप मर्द बन गए हैं. सब मेरे चोजन प्रोफेशन को जस्टिफाई करने की कोशिश करते हैं. हेलो हेलो जेनू, मैं जेनू जेनू जेनू. My mom says वो एक्चुअली घर से काम करता है. नो मॉम, मैं घर पे काम करता हूँ. बच्चों का ख्याल रखता हूँ, घर को नीट और क्लीन रखता हूँ. क्यों सर? और मास्टर शेफ लेवल का खाना भी बनाता हूं. आई थिंक आई एम डूइंग प्रीटी वेल. अब आप मुझे मर्दानगी का सर्टिफिकेट देना दें, आई डोंट केयर. मैं और मेरे 1.2 मिलियन सब्सक्राइबर्स काफी खुश हैं, क्योंकि मैंने वो किया जो मैंने चाहा.
Thank you very much. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया.